My name is William Morris, and the history that I'm about to tell, it is probably going to modify the current way of seeing the world. I know most of people will find it incredible, and believe me, even having experienced this adventure, having seen it with my own eyes and with all my senses, it was also incredible to myself. But the evidence is irrefutable for those who want to see it, and the memories indelible. Such evidence will be presented, and science will also change its perspective. Another path will be opened in the human mind forever. As for my personal life, I was a member of the Continental Navy, as the American Naval Force was called in the Revolutionary War. I was married to Lucy, and we were thinking of enlarging the family, but the war postponed every plan, as it usually does, with that pain that probably feels caught in the root of that shining tree that gives life to the garden. That immense pain that produces to move away from your loved ones and go to hell itself. One peaceful night, after the surrender of Saratoga, we were sailing through the northern Atlantic Ocean, rounding the islands on our way to Charleston Harbor. The full moon was the only light that illuminated our way, and during that night, thousands of histories and anecdotes arose among the boys over a little whiskey to calm the anxieties of a raw war. Even then, there was talk of James Cook's voyage and his obsession with crossing the Antarctic Circle, although it wasn't clear who was behind his funding or why the obsession. As I wasn't well steeped in the subject, the talk hadn't captivated me enough. I didn't pay much attention, and the boys went on with the histories. Captain Butler, well respected in the group, joined in the sailing histories by commenting that it was possible that there was a passage somewhere in the polar circle, and that this passage could be the connector to other worlds. He said it seriously, without a moment of hesitation. My attention turned to him, and the 5 or 6 of us in that cabin were speechless, listening to his history. We expect him to say that it was a joke, but that never happened. We could not believe that a captain was seriously telling that there could be lands behind the Antarctic Circle. Butler also commented that he knew from good sources at the highest levels that they were researching and funding trips to penetrate the harsh climate and barriers in the southern latitudes to find possible land and perhaps civilization beyond the Antarctic continent, and that they were in a hurry to carry out these missions, as many civilian navigators were circling the area and didn't look favorably on anyone else coming along. This history was even longer, and in great detail. He also commented that he observed with his own eye a map that indicated the coordinates that could be the opening of such a passage, and although he was stupefied by this history, and I think the others too. The fatigue and stress generated by a war conflict could not be wasted. It was a perfect moment of happiness that generates a breach of peace to be able to sleep a few hours. Time went by, and after the famous war, many of the ships used by the Continental Navy were rented, destroyed, captured, or sold. As at that time I was a person of good economic standing, especially after a war that we could say triumphant, if after a war can be called so, I made an offer for one of them and managed to keep it. Although my colleagues always scoffed at me because of that, as they say it was ridiculously high for such an old ship. The idea of the exploration trip to the south after Butler's history generated even more interest for me to bid it and keep the ship, although it needed repaired, therefore some extra money. I felt no guilt as I felt it as an investment, although I didn't know the real danger of such a trip. I needed to provide myself with a great navigation equipment. Although Lucy wasn't happy about this plan, I was planning to leave Charleston by the end of November and head with a few stops along the way straight to the Antarctic continent. During the idea of forming the team, I talked to former colleagues. Some of them made the most ridiculous excuses, and I don't blame them at all. The idea of such a trip was really not encouraging. Two of them who were there that same night that Butler told his history wanted to join as soon as I told them about this plan. But the most difficult part was to convince Butler, who had knowledge in navigation based on his experience and leadership, and also knew the coordinates where we should go. After gathering courage for a few weeks, I contacted the captain to tell him about my project and add him to the group. It was difficult to convince the captain of such a plan, and although in his voice I noticed some enthusiasm, he declined my offer, and it was like that for a while. Unexpectedly, on the morning of October 11th, he showed up at my house with another companion named Fent. He had maps that I had never seen and was full of documents that very few eyes had read. He told me that he'd accept the deal, but he was willing to understand that it could only be one-way trip. Then I understood that we had to take this trip professionally. The adventure was about to begin.